Hey, it's Cheryl, the Conscious Codependence Coach. Just getting in here real quick with a rant about my ideas on codependence versus vulnerability. Codependence is actually the illusion that our permission to take up space with our vulnerability, that our permission to say what is actually going on for us is in somebody else's hands. That the full authentic expression of ourselves, the light, the dark, our preferences in a moment, our desires in a moment, our wonderment, our curiosities in any given moment is up to another person if we're allowed to actually expose those things. So the exposing of our truth being in somebody else's hands is codependence, and living in permission and safety to hold all of our truths and expose them at any given moment is actual true vulnerability. So please go ahead, like or subscribe to my channel. And okay, here we go. I think it's important to bring up the concept of safety as I talk about vulnerability. Oftentimes we don't want to say what's there for us because we don't feel safe with another person. And in my work, in my programs, I go really into this concept of safety. Because what are we really talking about when we say safety? Are we saying, I don't want to say this thing to this other person because I don't feel physically safe? If you don't feel physically safe, like somebody's going to physically take advantage of you, if that's what's happening, that's another subject, okay? So I just want to highlight that and take that out of this conversation because that's not what I'm pointing to. So when we say, I don't feel safe with this person, what are we talking about? Are we talking about you don't feel existentially safe, right? Like they're not going to see you or understand you, or they're not going to believe you. And so what might happen is you may start to feel invisible. Or your nervous system might get flooded because you're having some traumatic reaction to somebody not seeing you. That happens often when we have sort of a repeat dynamic of our childhood, and our nervous system has this reaction that is actually an old reaction. So it's not really a good test for what's happening presently in the current moment. So oftentimes we get triggered and we're no longer present. We're having a past-paced reaction, and oftentimes that past-paced reaction will tell us we're not safe. And so we throw that word around a lot. Well, I don't feel safe to share this with this person. I don't feel safe. That's fine. If you don't feel safe, then don't say the thing or don't expose the thing. But where is that unsafety coming from? Is that unsafety coming from perhaps a past-paced echo that you think might happen in your nervous system, or is it actually coming from the other person? And is it like your identity doesn't feel safe, or you feel existentially not safe, or you feel like you're going to be demeaned or diminished? And is that actually coming from the other person, or is that coming from your nervous system's interpretation of the conversation? And this is something that we get to sort of tease out over time in my work, is are you defaulting to a historic response that's left over in your nervous system, or are you actually present in intimacy and vulnerability with a person, and you're legitimately feeling unsafe because of somebody else's behavior? So oftentimes when we look at vulnerability, we think, well, I don't want to be vulnerable with this person because of how they're going to respond and all of that stuff. And so what that says oftentimes is that your permission to be vulnerable and expose what's happening with you and expose your truth exists in somebody else's hands. And so in the process of my work, we bring that permission back into our own system. We bring the safety back into our own system. We bring vulnerability back into our own system. And so we have more choice as to when and how we're going to be vulnerable. And by vulnerability, what I mean is being able to expose anything that's currently happening with you in any current moment, right? You're curious, you're not sure, you're in wonderment of what's happening, you're feeling hurt, you're having some interpretation, you're feeling super excited, and oftentimes, we don't want to show all of our love and all of our excitement because that may feel too vulnerable, and we're afraid of being too much for another person, right? So vulnerability doesn't always have to mean, do I expose the dark? Sometimes it also means, do I expose how much light I actually have? Because perhaps you had an experience when you were a kid that someone told you were too much, or they couldn't contain you and they wanted you to shut it down or be smaller. So a lot of our relationship to vulnerability comes up in a codependent context because the fullest version of ourselves, the fullest expression of ourselves, depends on whether or not somebody else can receive it, handle it, hold it, not judge it. Most importantly, as we move towards our sovereignty, towards our independence of being, which is the North Star of any conscious codependence recovery path, most importantly, we train ourselves to be able to be vulnerable to ourselves, to hold the totality of our experience, to admit to ourselves what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're wanting, what we're curious about, what we're interpreting. Because in our codependent moments, we often set aside our experience and focus more on the other person, what they're thinking or what they're wanting from us, or what they're doing to us, or what they have availability for, right? And so in our conscious codependence recovery, we actually develop the ability to sit with ourselves and admit to ourselves what's happening for us. Oh, I notice I'm scared, or I notice I'm curious, or I notice I'm confused, or I notice I don't want to be here, right? Or whatever it is that, well, the little micro expressions, the micro sensations, the micro emotions, the micro thoughts, there's so many things that can happen in a moment of human presence that in our conscious codependence recovery, we get to sort of notice all the nuance of self and admit it to ourselves first. We don't always have to say it out loud, but the more we are vulnerable with ourselves, the more we notice our own experience, the more we give ourselves space to sit and feel it all and notice it all, the more we may be able to expose that vulnerability to another person, the more we can expand our threshold for actually having an experience, right? Codependence is when we are pushing off our experience. And in my work, we actually train ourselves to have the full totality of an experience, to be fully present, perhaps omnipresent, perhaps as present as possible, because codependence is future tripping, codependence is past tripping, codependence is a dissociation. Intimacy and vulnerability is full presence. And oftentimes we assess how present we can be because of how safe another person may seem to us. The way I see vulnerability is when we can expose our open heart and our broken heart at the exact same time. And that actually takes a lot of presence of self, because at any moment, well, this is a broad stroke, right? But I think for the most part, at any given moment, there's something we can find that we're super happy about, and there's something that we can find that we're super not happy about, right? We can access happiness and sadness at the same time. We can access awesome things and really sucky things at the exact same time. To be able to hold the variety pack of what the human experience is, and be with ourself in the myriad of sensations and emotions, and be able to expose that, not based on somebody else's energy. Now, here's the thing. I'm not saying, just don't be discerning, right? That's actually not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that perhaps there is a way more safety available to you than your codependence tells you that there is. Okay, I have way more thoughts on codependence and vulnerability, but I'll stop there. Please feel free to book your free Decode Your Codependence session with me. Holiday discounts coming up on my programs. Here's to your healing. Here's to the fullest expression of yourself. Here's to bringing back your vulnerability, your purity, and your innocence, and having your own heart be in your own hands, because your relationship with yourself is where it all begins. Happy healing, and life is now.